Just said I wouldn't make it past 5. My parents poured everything into me. Every dollar, every minute. Every prayer was for my survival. On my 5th birthday, the house was for once loud with forced cheer. Only my younger brother, Noah, too young to grasp the weight of the moment, asked Liam, "Will you die tomorrow?" That was the first time I ever saw Dad hit him. And Mom, she knelt on the floor weeping, bowing her head again and again, begging God to give me a few more years. But on Noah's first day of pre-K, I did the unforgivable. I whispered that my chest hurt and asked for a pain pill. Mom snapped. Her control shattered and she started screaming. She slapped me so hard my head whipped back. "How could you be so sickeningly selfish? Are you trying to kill your brother by stealing his one good day? We revolve around you, Liam. Can't we have just one moment to take? Come to school. If you want to die, just die. Stop torturing us." She threw the pill bottle at me. A cascade of plastic and white tablets. Grabbed Noah's hand and slammed the door behind them. I didn't say a word. I just watched the small cut on my forearm, where a shard of the bottle had nicked me, slowly begin to seep blood. My body was already going cold. The pill bottle fragment had caught my forearm. When I threw my hand up, I stared at the cut for 2 seconds. A doctor's warning echoing in my head. "Kid, you absolutely cannot get a cut. The bleeding won't stop." I scrambled for the band-aids. They were soaked through in under a minute. I turned to find a proper gauze bandage, but the blood was already dripping onto the clean tile floor. Mom, Carrie. She hated messes. I couldn't add this to her burden. I panicked, tearing at my sleeve to wipe the floor. But the blood seemed to explode the moment it hit the tile, smearing and spreading with every frantic wipe. I grabbed the nearest hand towel and wrapped it tightly around the wound. The cold started then. Not just the chill of the bathroom, but a deep systemic cold that traveled from my fingertips to my bones. I stumbled into the bathroom and ran, the tub full of the hottest water I could stand. Lighting in the heat brought a momentary reprieve. The blood was still flowing, staining the clear water a dark rose color. I suddenly needed them. I fumbled with my old cell phone and called Dad's number. It rang and rang. No answer. I called Mom. The background noise was deafening music, the high-pitched shriek of children cheering. It was a party a world away from my slowly reddening bathwater. "What is it, Liam? Make it fast." I was about to go on stage for the talent show. "Mom, I don't feel well." Her impatient voice cut through the noise. Sharp and impatient. "Not well again. Do you only feel unwell when the attention isn't on you? Liam, you're 8 years old. You are a big boy. Can't you for once be considerate?" Dial tone buzzed loud and empty. In the vast quiet of the bathroom, I watched the water deep into crimson. She was right. I was nothing but a complication. My illness was a complication. My unhappiness was a complication. And now my bleeding was a complication. Mom's favorite knit cardigan lay draped over the edge of the tub. I carefully pulled it over my face. It smelled faintly of her. That comforting, familiar scent of gardenia and laundry soap. It brought me back to when I was little and feverish. And she would watch over me just like this. The water was growing cold. The flow of blood seemed to be slowing, too. Maybe it was almost done. As my head started to spin, I wondered if once all the bad blood was gone, I would be better. Then Mom and Dad wouldn't have to worry about their sickly son. Noah wouldn't have to concede to his older brother all the time. And I wouldn't have to be so painfully careful, so constantly good, biting down on the pain every midnight just to avoid making a sound. I curled up in the tub, feeling as safe and calm as if I were back in my mother's womb. The next time I opened my eyes, I only saw a tiny, pale version of myself floating in the bathtub. So I was already dead. The front door opened. I heard Noah's voice, bright and full of energy. "Liam, I'm home." I rushed out. Mom and Dad, Carrie and Dan walked in holding Noah's hands. Dad carried a store-bought strawberry cake. Dan paused, looking at the mess I'd left in the living room. "What is all this?" Carrie frowned. He was having a tantrum at lunchtime. He was mad I was taking Noah to school. So he lied and said he was sick. Dad's expression darkened. He's getting impossible. I tried to explain, waving my spectral hands frantically in front of him. No, it wasn't intentional. Liam wasn't trying to make you mad. My hand passed right through Dan's shoulder. They felt nothing. Noah broke free and ran to my bedroom door. He tapped lightly. Liam. Come out and have some cake. Silence. Noah looked up. Is he asleep? I wrapped my arms around him in a hug he couldn't feel. Thank you, Noah. Mom's voice was hard. He's not asleep. He's pouting. Don't worry about him. We're eating first. Dad put the cake on the dining table. Noah watched with wide, expectant eyes. He whispered, but I wanted to wait for Liam. Dad tore open the box and exchanged a look with Mom. If Liam had even half your common sense, Noah, we'd have a much easier life. The candles were placed and lit. Noah was lifted onto a chair under the warm gaze of his parents. He blew out 5 flickering flames. It was his 5th birthday, too. Mom asked gently. Did you make a wish, sweetie? Noah's eyes sparkled. Yes. I wished that, Liam. Dad smiled and ruffled his hair. Wishes don't come true if you say them out loud, buddy. I watched from the side. Every year my birthday had been steeped in the smell of medicine. The candles felt like a countdown. But Noah's birthday finally felt like a birthday should. When it was time to cut the cake, Noah insisted on the biggest slice. This one is for Liam. He carried the plate to my door and knocked again. Liam, come share my strawberry cake. No response. The smile slid slowly from Noah's face. He walked back to the table. Liam won't talk to me. Dad suddenly reached out, snatching the plate from Noah's hands. He threw the perfect slice of strawberry cake, Noah's gift, into the trash can. He slammed his hand on the table, his temper blazing. Fine. If he won't eat it, no one calls him again. He can starve until he learns how to behave. Noah flinched, his eyes instantly turning red. Mom pulled him into her embrace and shot a sharp look at Dad. Don't yell at the kids, she cooed to Noah. It's okay, sweetie. We'll eat first. When Liam knows he's done something wrong, he'll come out. I knelt by the trash can, gazing at the discarded slice. The strawberries on the cream were so fresh. Now it lay there, mingled with crumpled napkins and coffee grounds. What a waste. Strawberry was my favorite. Noah ate his small slice, slowly glancing toward my closed door every few seconds. Mom and Dad ate in silence. There should have been 4 places at the table. Now 1 seat was empty. I floated over and sat in my spot, whispering a soundless happy birthday to my little brother. That evening, Mom was bathing Noah. I hovered by the shower curtain, my heart clenching, terrified she would pull it back and see me in the tub. In the cloud of steam, Mom rubbed bubbles onto Noah's skin, looked up, his wet hair stuck to his forehead. Mom, why hasn't Liam come out yet? Mom's hands paused. He's probably just tired, sweetie. Noah murmured, but I miss him. I haven't seen him all day. Mom turned off the water and wrapped him completely in a large towel, pulling him into a hug. Noah. Do you ever get mad at Mom and Dad? Mad about what? Mom held him tighter. Mad because we're always focused on Liam. Because we always give him the best things. Because sometimes we forget to give you enough time. Noah wrapped his small, wet arms around her neck. No, why would I? Liam is sick. My teacher said that people who are sick need the most help. I want to help you and Dad take care of him. Mom's shoulders began to tremble slightly. She buried her face in his towel, silent for a long moment. You're such a good boy, Noah. She sniffled. Liam. Liam is very sad, too. I plastered myself against the cool tile floor, listening as Mom continued. Your brother was born with a bad heart. The doctor said he might not grow up. Her voice was thick with tears. So your dad and I were always terrified. He was in pain, terrified he wouldn't make it. We wanted to give him every good thing we could. Her voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. But sometimes I get so tired. Sometimes I wish he was healthy. Sometimes I wish I could spend more time with you. Noah listened, not fully understanding, but patting her back with his tiny hand. I was curled up in the corner. Tears, transparent and meaningless, falling to the ground. I'm sorry, Mom. It was my fault, I sobbed. If I had never been born, if you only had Noah, everything would be so much better. They heard nothing. After the bath, Mom tucked Noah into bed. Then she walked to my bedroom door and stood there for a long time. Finally, she raised her hand and knocked gently. Liam, are you sleeping? I floated in front of her, trying to reach out, but my fingertips passed through the air. Mom shouldn't have yelled at you today. I was wrong. It was Noah's first day of school and I was so nervous. I wasn't trying to be mean. She waited, listening for a response. I couldn't give her one. Never again. Mom sighed. I left a slice of cake on the dining room table. It's your favorite strawberry. Please eat it. She stood there for a few more seconds before walking back to the master bedroom. The door closed. I went to the living room and saw the cake on the dining table. It was small on a simple plate. The strawberry tilted slightly. Late at night, I looked at the little me in the bathtub. The water was completely cold. My face was white as paper. Mom never opened the curtain. She didn't know that the cake she left was a gift I could never eat. The apology she offered was one I could never hear. I followed Mom into the master bedroom. Dad looked up when she entered. Did Liam come out? Mom sat on the bed folding clothes. She shook her head. No movement. He's older now. He has his pride. Dad. Dad took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Liam is miserable, Carrie. He's never been to school. He barely has any friends. Seeing his brother go off to pre-K. It's natural he'd be jealous. Maybe we should hire him a private tutor. Mom's hands froze on a shirt. A scooter. With what money, Dan? We still owe the hospital from last month's medicine. Dad sighed and rolled onto his side. I'll start driving for DoorDash after work. A few extra hours a night we can save up. Mom turned to look at him. The bedside lamp illuminated his face. Dark circles under his eyes starkly visible. You're already exhausted from your day job. That's too dangerous. Dad waved a dismissive hand. I'm fine. I'm strong. Just my shoulder is a little tight lately. Can you put a patch on it? Dad turned his back. Mom lifted his pajama collar. The skin on his shoulder was red and swollen. I stood by the bed watching the inflamed skin. And my ghost tears fell onto the duvet. I used to complain that he came home too late. That he didn't play with me enough. I never realized that every late night, every hour he spent away was a direct act of love for me. I flew into his arms, my own invisible, desperate hug. I'm so sorry, Dad. Please forgive my selfishness. Mom carefully applied the medicated patch to Dad's shoulder, her fingers lingering there for a moment longer than necessary. The gesture was tender, weighted with years of unspoken exhaustion. I watched the way her thumb traced the edge of the inflammation, as if she could will the pain away through touch alone. Dan, she whispered, her voice cracking in the lamplight. Sometimes I wonder if we're doing the right thing. We're so focused on keeping Liam alive that we're barely living ourselves. Dad reached back and clasped her hand. He's our son, Carrie. What else can we do? I know, she breathed, and there was something breaking in her tone. I know. But today, when I snapped at him, the look in his eyes. I've never seen him so hurt. And Noah, sweet Noah, he just keeps trying to share everything with his brother, and Liam won't even open the door. She lowered her forehead to Dad's shoulder blade, and I saw her body shake with silent sobs. The room filled with the sound of her muffled crying, and Dad turned to pull her into his arms. We'll make it right tomorrow, he murmured into her hair. We always do. He knows we love him. But I didn't know. Not really. Not when every expression of their love came wrapped in anxiety, in medical bills, in the constant terror of losing me. I floated there in their bedroom, a ghost watching my parents hold each other in the wreckage of their impossible choices, and I finally understood, they weren't cruel. They were drowning. And I had been the anchor pulling them under. The house settled into its nighttime rhythm. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. The old pipes creaked as they cooled. I drifted through the rooms, observing the life I'd left behind in fragments, Noah's backpack by the door, stuffed with new crayons and a lunchbox shaped like a dinosaur. Dad's work boots, worn down at the heels, mud still caked on the soles from a job site. Mom's gardening gloves on the windowsill, the fingertips stained green from her precious few minutes of peace among the tomato plants. Every object told a story of sacrifice I'd been too young, too sick, too wrapped up in my own pain to see. I found myself back in the living room, staring at that slice of strawberry cake. The cream had started to glisten under the overhead light, tiny beads of moisture forming on its surface. In a few hours, it would start to turn. By morning, Mom would throw it away, just like she'd thrown away so many other peace offerings I'd been too stubborn or too hurt to accept. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 8 years desperate for her attention, for her softness, for proof that I mattered beyond my medical charts and pill schedules. And now, when she'd finally offered it, I was beyond reach. I sank down onto the couch, or at least performed the motion of sinking. My ghostly form hovered just above the cushions, weightless and irrelevant. The family photos on the wall caught my eye, a gallery of moments I'd almost forgotten. There was one from my 4th birthday, taken in the hospital. I was bald from the medications, my face puffy, but I was smiling. Mom and Dad flanked me on either side of the bed, and Mom was holding a cupcake with a single candle. The joy in that photo was real, even if it was tinted with desperation. Next to it hung a more recent photo, all 4 of us at the park. It must have been taken last summer. Noah was on Dad's shoulders, his gap-toothed grin taking up half the frame. I stood next to Mom, her hand resting on my shoulder, and I was looking up at her with an expression of such pure longing it made my chest ache all over again. I'd been trying to memorize her face, I realized. Even then, some part of me had known our time was running out. Around midnight, I heard movement from Noah's room. The door creaked open, and my little brother padded out in his rocket ship pajamas, clutching his stuffed elephant. He moved with the careful stealth of a child on a mission, glancing back toward our parents' closed door before tiptoeing to my bedroom. He knocked, 3 soft taps. "Liam," he whispered. "Are you awake?" I pressed my translucent hand against the door from the inside, wishing with everything I had left that I could turn the handle, that I could open it and pull him into a hug and tell him I was sorry for every birthday I'd overshadowed, every family dinner I'd ruined with my presence. Noah waited, his small frame silhouetted against the nightlight in the hallway. When no answer came, his shoulders slumped. But he didn't leave. Instead, he sat down right there in the hallway, his back against my door, and began to whisper. "I know you're probably sleeping," he said softly, "but I wanted to tell you about my first day. It was really fun, Liam. We have a reading corner with so many books, and the teacher, Mrs. Henderson, she's really nice. She has a fish tank, and there's this one fish that's bright orange, and she said I could help feed them on Fridays." He paused, adjusting his elephant in his lap. "I made a friend. His name is Marcus, and he has a brother too. An older brother, like you. Marcus said his brother taught him how to tie his shoes, and I said my brother taught me how to count to 100. I slid down the door until I was sitting parallel to him, just a thin barrier of wood between us. I didn't tell anyone you were sick," Noah continued, his voice dropping even lower. "I didn't want them to ask questions and make you feel bad. I just told them you were the best big brother in the world and that you were going to teach me how to ride a bike when you felt better." His words landed like stones in my chest, each one a small weight of guilt and love combined. I'd been so consumed by my own suffering that I'd never stopped to consider what it cost him. Noah had built his entire understanding of brotherhood around accommodating my illness, around making himself smaller so I could have more room to breathe. "Mom and Dad got really mad today," he whispered, and now his voice wavered. "I think it's my fault. If I hadn't asked to go to school, if I'd just stayed home with you, maybe everyone would be happy." "No," I said aloud, even though I knew he couldn't hear me. "No, Noah, none of this is your fault. I wish you'd come out," he said, and I could hear him crying now, soft little hiccups of breath. "I miss you. Even when you're home, I miss you, because you're always tired or hurting, and I can't help. I'm too little to help. He wiped his nose on his pajama sleeve. I wished for you to get better, Liam. That was my birthday wish. I didn't care about the cake or the presents or anything else. I just want you to not hurt anymore. I reached through the door and tried to touch his hair, his shoulder, anything. My hand passed through him like smoke through water. He shivered slightly, as if he'd felt a draft, and pulled his elephant closer. I love you, Noah whispered to the closed door. Even if you're mad at me. Even if you don't want to talk to me. I'll always love you, okay? You're my brother. He sat there for another 10 minutes, waiting for a response that would never come. Finally, he stood up, planted a small kiss on the door panel, and shuffled back to his room. I stayed there on the floor, my face buried in my hands, sobbing without sound or substance. In trying to spare my family the burden of my illness, I'd made everything so much worse. I'd let them think I was angry, that I was punishing them, when really I'd just been bleeding out in a bathtub, too afraid to add one more crisis to their overflowing plate. The night stretched on in that peculiar way time moves for the dead, simultaneously endless and instantaneous. I found myself back in the bathroom, staring at my body in the tub. The water had gone completely still, a dark burgundy mirror reflecting nothing. My face was submerged just below the surface, eyes closed, lips slightly parted. Mom's cardigan floated around me like a shroud. I looked peaceful. That was the strange thing. In death, I'd finally found the rest that had eluded me in life. But looking at myself like this, from the outside, I couldn't help but think about what would happen when they found me. Dad would probably be the one to discover the body. He always checked on me before leaving for work, standing in the doorway for a moment to watch the rise and fall of my chest, assuring himself I'd made it through another night. Tomorrow morning, he'd open that bathroom door, and the rise and fall would be gone. I imagined his shout, the way his voice would crack. The sound of Mom's running footsteps. Noah asking what was wrong, why was everyone screaming, could he please see Liam now? The funeral would be small. We didn't have money for anything elaborate, and I hadn't lived long enough to accumulate many friends. There would be the doctor, maybe, the one who'd warned me about the cuts. Some of Dad's coworkers would show up, bringing casseroles and sympathy cards. Mom's sister from Portland, who'd always said they were spending too much on a child who was going to die anyway. Noah would have to grow up as the boy whose brother died on his 5th birthday. That would define him, shape him, possibly destroy him. Kids would whisper about it at school. Adults would give him pitying looks. And he'd carry that weight for the rest of his life, all because I'd been too scared to call 911, too convinced I was a burden to ask for the help I desperately needed. This can't be the ending, I said to the empty bathroom, to the corpse in the tub, to whatever cosmic force was keeping me tethered here instead of moving on. There has to be something I can do. As if in answer, a strange sensation pulled at my chest, or where my chest used to be. It felt like a thread, thin and gossamer, connecting me to something beyond this house, beyond this moment. I followed the feeling, letting it guide me, and found myself being pulled toward Noah's room. He was asleep now, curled on his side, his elephant tucked under his chin. He'd been crying, his pillow was damp, and his cheeks were streaked with dried tears. In the moonlight filtering through his window, he looked impossibly young, impossibly fragile. The thread tugged again, and suddenly I understood. This wasn't about me anymore. It had never really been about me. I was the catalyst, yes, the crisis around which everything revolved, but the real story, the one that mattered, was about them. About how they would survive this. About how they would heal. I couldn't change what had happened. I couldn't rewind time and make different choices, couldn't unsay the words that had been spoken or undo the hurt that had been inflicted. But maybe, just maybe, I could help guide them through what came next. Morning arrived with cruel punctuality. Sunlight crept across the floors, indifferent to tragedy. I heard Dad's alarm go off at 6 a.m. sharp, followed by the groan of bed springs as he hauled himself upright. Mom murmured something about coffee, her voice thick with sleep. I positioned myself in the hallway, watching as Dad emerged from the bedroom in his work clothes, already carrying the weight of another day on his shoulders. He paused at Noah's door, peeking in to check on him, then turned toward my room. His hand reached for the doorknob. "Liam," he called softly. "You awake, buddy? I'm heading out soon. Want to say goodbye?" Silence. He frowned, then opened the door. My bedroom was empty, the bed still made from yesterday morning. His frown deepened. Carrie, he called back toward the master bedroom. Is Liam in there with you? What? Mom appeared in the hallway, still in her nightgown, her hair disheveled. No, why would he be? They exchanged a look, and I saw the first flicker of real concern cross Dad's face. He moved to check the living room, the kitchen. Liam, he called, louder now. This isn't funny, son. Where are you? Mom joined the search, her movements becoming more frantic with each empty room. Liam. Liam, answer me. That's when Dad noticed the bathroom door was closed. He approached it slowly, and I could see his hand trembling as it reached for the handle. Some part of him already knew. Some parental instinct was screaming that something was terribly, irreversibly wrong. The door swung open. Time seemed to fracture. I watched Dad's face transform, confusion melting into horror, horror crystallizing into anguish. He made a sound I'd never heard before, somewhere between a sob and a shout, and lurched toward the tub. Carrie. The word tore out of him. Call 911. Now. Mom appeared in the doorway and froze. Her eyes locked onto the bathtub, onto the small body floating in dark water, and the color drained from her face. She swayed, reaching out to steady herself against the doorframe. No, she whispered. No, 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 no. Dad was already pulling my body from the water, his hands shaking so badly he could barely grip. My limbs were stiff, unresponsive. The cardigan fell away, revealing the crude bandage on my forearm, soaked through and useless. He's cold, Dad said, his voice breaking. He's so cold. Carrie, he's... No. Mom suddenly snapped out of her paralysis and rushed forward, shoving Dad aside. She placed her hands on my chest and started compressions, counting under her breath, tears streaming down her face. 1, 2, 3, 4. Come on, baby. Come on. Breathe. Please breathe. Dad fumbled for his phone, his finger slipping on the screen. When the operator answered, he could barely form words. My son, 8 years old, I think he's, please, we need. In Noah's room, I heard stirring. He was waking up, disturbed by the commotion. No, I thought desperately. Not like this. He can't see this. I flew to his room and tried to close the door, but my hands passed through the wood uselessly. Noah sat up, rubbing his eyes, and started to climb out of bed. Liam, he called out sleepily. Is that you? He padded into the hallway just as Dad was carrying my body out of the bathroom, Mom following close behind, still trying to perform CPR as they moved. Noah stopped dead in his tracks, his elephant falling from his hands. Liam, he said again, but this time his voice was different. Small. Broken. Mom looked up and saw him standing there. Her face contorted with fresh anguish. Noah, go back to your room. Right now. Don't look. But it was too late. Noah had seen everything. His brother, limp and white, being carried through the house like a broken doll. The blood-stained water still dripping from my hair. Mom's hands, covered in red, pressing desperately against a chest that wouldn't rise. Is Liam sleeping? Noah asked, but he already knew the answer. Kids always know. The paramedics arrived in a blur of motion and noise. They swept in with equipment and professional efficiency, taking over from Mom's frantic compressions. I watched them work on my body, checking for vital signs, preparing interventions. One of them, a woman with kind eyes and gray streaks in her hair, looked up at her partner and shook her head almost imperceptibly. How long? The partner asked quietly. Hours, she replied, checking my skin temperature. At least 6, maybe more. Rigor mortis has started. Mom overheard. She let out a wail that seemed to come from the depths of her soul, collapsing against Dad, who caught her even though he looked like he might collapse himself. They clung to each other, their bodies shaking with sobs, while Noah stood frozen in the hallway, his small face uncomprehending. The kind-eyed paramedic approached my parents gently. I'm so sorry, she said, and her voice was genuine. There's nothing more we can do. He's been gone for too long. I'm so sorry. No, Mom kept saying, over and over. No, I just talked to him yesterday. He was fine. He was just angry. He was just, her words dissolved into incoherent sobbing. Dad pulled her closer, his own tears falling into her hair. "It's my fault," he choked out. "I should have checked on him. I should have gone in last night. I should have." "You couldn't have known," the paramedic said softly. "Sometimes these things happen, and there's no way to." I yelled at him. Mom suddenly screamed, pulling away from Dad's embrace. "I told him to die. I told my baby to just die, and he listened to me. Oh God, what have I done? What have I done?" She sank to the floor, her hands covering her face, her whole body convulsing with grief. Dad knelt beside her, trying to offer comfort he didn't have, his own face etched with devastation. And Noah? Noah just stood there, watching his world fall apart, too young to process it, too innocent to understand that sometimes love isn't enough, that sometimes people break under the weight of impossible circumstances. I knelt in front of him, even though I knew it was useless, and tried to wrap my arms around him. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "Noah, I'm so sorry. This wasn't supposed to happen. You weren't supposed to see this." A police officer arrived to take the report. Then a social worker, because a child had died. They asked questions in low, respectful voices. Where were the parents yesterday? What time did they last see him alive? Were there any signs of distress? Mom told them everything through tears, how she'd yelled at me, how she'd thrown the pills, how she'd refused to come home when I called. Each confession seemed to tear another piece from her soul. "I killed my own son," she whispered at one point. "I was supposed to protect him, and instead I—" "Mrs. Patterson," the social worker interrupted gently, "what happened here was a tragedy, but it wasn't murder. Your son had a medical condition. The report says he had a cut that wouldn't stop bleeding. That's not something you could have prevented by being home." But Mom didn't seem to hear her. She was lost in her own hell, replaying the conversation, reimagining what she could have done differently. The coroner came. They zipped my body into a black bag, and Mom let out another one of those soul-shattering wails. Dad had to physically hold her back to keep her from throwing herself on top of the stretcher. "Please don't take him," she begged. "Please, he's just a baby. He's my baby. Please." "They took me anyway. That's what they do. The dead have to be processed, examined, filed away." I watched my body disappear through the front door, and with it, any lingering hope that this might somehow be fixable. The house fell into a terrible silence after everyone left. Mom sat on the couch, staring at nothing. Dad paced the kitchen, his phone in his hand, trying to figure out who to call, what to do next. And Noah sat on the floor in the hallway, right outside my bedroom door, exactly where he'd sat last night. "He's not coming back, is he?" Noah asked quietly. Mom's head snapped up. She looked at her surviving son as if seeing him for the first time, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Oh, sweetie. Come here." Noah stood slowly and walked to the couch. Mom pulled him into her lap, holding him so tightly it must have been uncomfortable, but he didn't complain. He just let her hold him while they both cried. "I don't understand," Noah whispered. "Was Liam mad at me? Is that why he went away?" "No." Mom said fiercely, pulling back to look him in the face. "No, Noah, none of this was your fault. None of it. Liam loved you so much. You were the best thing in his life, do you understand? The very best thing. Then why?" Noah's face crumpled. "Why didn't he come out? Why didn't he eat the cake? I saved him the biggest piece." Mom didn't have an answer. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that depression and illness and desperation can make someone give up? How do you help a child understand something that adults can barely comprehend? Dad came over and sat beside them, wrapping his arms around both of them. They stayed like that for a long time, a family of 3 where there should have been 4, trying to hold together what was left. I sat across from them, watching, my ethereal heart breaking all over again. This was my legacy, a mother destroyed by guilt, a father crushed by failure, and a little brother who would grow up believing he wasn't enough to make me stay. But then Noah said something that changed everything. "I felt him last night," he whispered. "When I was sitting outside his door. I felt something, like a hug." "Do you think that was Liam saying goodbye?" Mom and Dad exchanged a look. "Maybe," Mom said softly. "Maybe it was. I think he's still here," Noah continued, his child's certainty unshaken by adult skepticism. I think he's listening. I can feel it. And suddenly, I realized he was right. He could feel me. Maybe not consciously, maybe not in any way he could articulate, but on some level, Noah knew I was still in this house, still watching over them. The thread in my chest pulled again, stronger this time. I looked down and saw it glowing faintly, a silvery cord connecting me to Noah, to Mom, to Dad. It pulsed with energy, with purpose. I wasn't meant to move on yet. I was meant to help them heal. The days that followed were a blur of awful necessities. The funeral home. The obituary. The service. Mom wanted to bury me in my favorite blue shirt, the one with the spaceship on it, but when she went to find it in my closet, she broke down completely. Dad had to finish the task while she sobbed in their bedroom. Relatives started arriving. Mom's sister from Portland, who had the decency to keep her previous opinions to herself. Dad's brother from Chicago, who'd always been kind to me. They brought casseroles and sympathy and uncomfortable silences. Noah didn't understand why everyone was at the house. He kept asking when the party was over, when things would go back to normal. Each time, Mom or Dad would have to explain again that Liam wasn't coming back, and each time, Noah would nod like he understood, but his eyes said otherwise. The funeral was held on a gray Thursday. The church was smaller than I'd imagined, and only half full. Our family doctor came, looking genuinely sorrowful. Some of Dad's coworkers filled a pew. A few neighbors who'd known us for years. My casket was white, child-sized, lined with blue satin. Mom had insisted on keeping it open for the viewing, even though the funeral director had advised against it. She needed to see me one more time, needed to convince herself that this was real. People filed past, offering condolences, touching my cold hands, whispering prayers. I hovered above the casket, watching their faces. Some looked genuinely sad. Others seemed uncomfortable, eager to get this over with. A few were clearly thinking about their own mortality, their own children, grateful it wasn't them standing in my parents' shoes. Noah refused to go near the casket. He sat in the front pew between Mom and Dad, clutching his elephant, staring at his shoes. When it was time for the family to say their final goodbyes, Mom and Dad approached together, but Noah stayed seated. "I don't want to," he said when Dad tried to coax him forward. "If I don't look, he's still just in the bathroom. He'll come out when he's ready." Mom knelt in front of him, her black dress pooling on the floor. "Noah, sweetie, this is the last time we'll get to see him. Don't you want to say goodbye?" "No." Noah's voice was firm. "I already said goodbye last night. I told him I loved him. He knows." Something about that simple statement, "he knows," made Mom finally break completely. She'd been holding herself together through sheer force of will, trying to be strong for Noah, for Dad, for all the people watching. But hearing her 5-year-old son speak with such certainty about his brother's love, she finally surrendered to the grief. She collapsed there on the church floor, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. Dad and Mom's sister had to help her up, had to practically carry her to the casket. She placed her hand on my chest, over the spaceship on my shirt, and bent to kiss my forehead. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her tears falling onto my face. "Liam, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean those things. I was tired and scared, and I took it out on you, and now you're gone and I can never take it back. I can never make it right." She pressed her forehead to mine, her body shaking. "You were never a burden. Do you hear me? You were a gift. Every day we had you was a gift, even the hard days, even the painful days. I would give anything, anything, to have those days back. To have one more chance to hold you, to tell you how much I love you, to be the mother you deserved." Dad joined her, his hand on her back, his own tears falling freely. "We should have been better," he said to my still form. "We should have been so much better. You deserved parents who didn't get so tired, who didn't get so overwhelmed. You deserved to feel safe, to feel loved every single moment. I'm sorry we failed you, son. I'm so sorry." They stood there together, mourning not just my death but all the ways they'd fallen short in my life. And I stood there with them, my ghostly hands on their shoulders, wishing I could tell them that I understood, that I forgave them, that love and failure had always existed side by side in our house, and that was okay. We were all just human, all just doing our best with impossible circumstances. The service was brief. A pastor who'd never met me gave a generic sermon about children being angels returned to heaven. Noah fell asleep halfway through, exhausted from crying. Mom stared at the casket the entire time, as if she could will me back to life through sheer determination. At the cemetery, under a weak autumn sun, they lowered me into the ground. The finality of it, the sound of dirt hitting the casket, sent Mom into another spiral. She tried to throw herself into the grave, screaming my name, and it took 3 people to pull her back. Noah watched all of this with wide, traumatized eyes. This was what he'd remember about his 5th birthday week, his brother's funeral, his mother's breakdown, his father's silent devastation. I knelt beside him and whispered, even though I knew he couldn't hear me properly, I'm going to make this right. Somehow, I'm going to help fix this. I promise. The thread in my chest glowed brighter. In the weeks that followed, the house became a tomb. Mom stopped gardening, stopped cooking, stopped doing much of anything. She'd sit for hours in my bedroom, holding my clothes, crying until she had no tears left. Dad threw himself into work, taking extra shifts, staying gone as much as possible because being home meant confronting the empty space where I used to be. And Noah. Noah tried so hard to be good. He stopped asking for things. He ate whatever was put in front of him without complaint. He played quietly in his room, never disturbing his parents. He was trying to make himself small enough that maybe they wouldn't lose him too. It was breaking my heart all over again. One night, about 3 weeks after the funeral, I found Noah in his room, talking to his elephant. "Mr. Snuffles," he whispered, "do you think Mom and Dad still love me? They don't smile anymore. They don't tuck me in like they used to. Maybe they're mad because I'm still here and Liam isn't." He pulled his knees to his chest. I wish I could trade places with him. Then everyone would be happy again. No. I shouted, even though he couldn't hear me. "Noah, no, you can't think that." But the thread in my chest pulled violently, and suddenly I felt something shift. The air in the room seemed to thicken, to become more substantial. And Noah's head jerked up, his eyes scanning the room. "Liam," he whispered. "Are you here?" I froze. Could he actually sense me? "I miss you," Noah continued, talking to the empty air. "Everyone misses you. Mom cries all the time. Dad is never home. And I don't know what to do. How do I make them happy again?" The thread pulsed, and I felt myself being pulled toward Noah. Before I could understand what was happening, I was kneeling in front of him, and when I reached out to touch his hand, he shivered. "Cold," he murmured. Then his eyes widened. "Liam. Is that you? I can feel you." My translucent hand rested on his, and through some mechanism I didn't understand, he could perceive it. Not see it, exactly, but feel it, a cold pressure, a presence. "Don't give up," I tried to say, putting all my will into the words. "Noah, don't ever think you should trade places. They need you. They need you so much." He tilted his head, listening to something beyond normal hearing. "I can't hear the words," he said softly, "but I can feel something. Are you trying to tell me something?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see it, and squeezed his hand gently. He smiled through his tears. "I'm going to help them," he said with sudden determination. "If you can't be here, then I have to be good enough for both of us. I have to make sure they don't forget how to be happy." "That's not your job," I tried to say, but he'd already made up his mind. Over the following days, Noah launched his campaign to heal his broken family. He started small, putting his toys away without being asked, making his bed, setting the table for dinner. Then he got bolder. He found Mom in my bedroom one afternoon and crawled into her lap. "Mom," he said gently, "I think Liam would be sad if he saw you crying all the time. I think he'd want you to remember the happy times too." Mom looked down at him, startled. "What made you think that, sweetie?" "I just know," Noah said simply. "He told me." "He told you?" Mom's voice was careful, worried he was having some kind of break from reality. "Not with words," Noah explained. "But I can feel it. He's still here, Mom. He's watching over us. And he wants us to be okay." Mom pulled him closer, fresh tears streaming down her face, but this time they weren't just tears of grief. There was something else in them, a fragile, tentative hope. "You really think so?" she whispered. Noah nodded firmly. "I know so. He loves us. He wants us to be happy." From that day forward, something began to shift. It was slow, healing always is, but it was real. Mom started spending less time in my room and more time with Noah. She'd read to him before bed, like she used to, and sometimes she'd tell stories about me, the funny things I'd said, the sweet moments we'd shared. Dad started coming home earlier. At first, it was just for dinner, but gradually he began to reclaim his place in the family. He'd play board games with Noah, help him with his homework, take him to the park on weekends. And Noah, wise beyond his years, became the thread that held them together. When Mom had a bad day, he'd bring her flowers from the garden, her garden, which he'd started tending in her absence. When Dad looked overwhelmed, Noah would ask him to read a story or help build a Lego set, giving him an excuse to be present, to be Dad instead of the grief-stricken man who'd failed his son. I watched all of this unfold, the thread in my chest growing warmer, brighter. I was still there, still watching over them, but my purpose was becoming clear. I wasn't meant to haunt them or to keep them trapped in grief. I was meant to guide them toward healing, to help them find their way back to each other. 6 months after my death, on what would have been my 9th birthday, Mom did something remarkable. She organized a celebration. I know this might seem strange, she told Dad and Noah that morning, but I've been thinking. We spent 8 years terrified of losing Liam, and in doing so, I think we forgot to fully celebrate having him. Today, I want to celebrate his life, not just mourn his death. Dad looked uncertain, but Noah's face lit up. What did Liam like to do? He asked. Mom smiled, a real smile, the first genuine one I'd seen in months. He loved stargazing. He used to beg your dad to take him outside at night to look at the constellations, remember? Dad nodded, his eyes distant with memory. He could name every planet. He wanted to be an astronaut. Then tonight, Mom declared, we're going to have a birthday party under the stars. We'll have strawberry cake, his favorite, and we'll tell stories about him, and we'll remember all the joy he brought into our lives. That evening, they spread a blanket in the backyard. Dad set up his old telescope, the one he'd bought when I was 6, hoping to share his love of astronomy with me. Mom brought out the strawberry cake, 9 candles flickering in the growing darkness. Noah sat between them, his elephant in his lap, looking up at the emerging stars. Should we sing? Noah asked softly. Mom nodded, her voice wavering but steady as she began. Happy birthday to you. Dad joined in, his deep voice harmonizing with hers. Noah sang too, his small voice carrying across the quiet yard. When they finished, they sat in silence for a moment, the candles casting dancing shadows across their faces. Make a wish, Liam, Mom whispered to the sky. Wherever you are, make a wish. I knelt beside the blanket, looking at the 3 of them bathed in candlelight and starshine, and I did make a wish. I wished for them to heal completely, to find happiness again, to build a life that honored my memory without being imprisoned by it. The candles flickered, and then, impossibly, one of them went out. Not from wind, the night was perfectly still. It simply extinguished, as if someone had blown it out. Noah's eyes went wide. Did you see that? Liam's here. He made his wish. Mom and Dad exchanged glances, and I could see them struggling between rational explanation and the desire to believe. Finally, Mom reached over and squeezed Noah's hand. Yes, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, I think he is. They cut the cake together, and this time, when Noah insisted on saving a piece for me, Mom didn't throw it away. She placed it on a small plate beside the blanket, a symbolic offering to a brother who couldn't eat it but who could appreciate the gesture. Dad pointed out constellations through the telescope, teaching Noah the same names I'd learned years ago. Orion. Cassiopeia. The Big Dipper. Noah listened intently, asking questions, and with each answer, I could see Dad coming more alive, rediscovering the joy of sharing knowledge, of being a father. Liam would have loved this, Noah said at one point, and instead of the comment sending everyone into sadness, Mom smiled. He would have corrected your pronunciation of Cassiopeia, she said with a soft laugh. He was very particular about getting the names right. That's because Dad told him that knowing the real names was like having a secret code with the universe, Dad added, and there was warmth in his voice, nostalgia without the sharp edge of pain. They shared more stories as the night deepened. Funny moments, tender moments, even the difficult moments viewed now through the lens of time and acceptance. With each memory, I felt the thread in my chest loosening slightly, as if my hold on this world was becoming less necessary. When Noah finally started yawning, Mom gathered him up. Time for bed, astronaut, she murmured. Can we do this every year? Noah asked sleepily. For Liam's birthday? Mom kissed his forehead. Every single year. I promise. As they walked back to the house, Dad lingered behind to pack up the telescope. He looked up at the stars one more time, and I could have sworn his eyes found exactly where I was hovering. I hope you're at peace, son, he said quietly. I hope wherever you are, you're not hurting anymore. And I hope you can forgive us for not being perfect. We loved you. We still love you. We always will. I forgive you, I said, even though he couldn't hear. I forgive you, and I love you too. All of you. The thread pulsed one more time, warm and bright, and I understood. This was goodbye, not the terrible goodbye of my death, but a gentle release, a letting go. Over the next year, I watched my family continue to heal. Mom returned to her garden with renewed purpose, planting a special section in my memory, night-blooming flowers that opened under the stars. She started volunteering at the children's hospital, sitting with sick kids whose parents needed a break, offering them the patience and understanding she wished she'd given me more consistently. Dad cut back his hours at work. He'd learned the hard way that time was more precious than money, that the moments we have with the people we love are finite and irreplaceable. He coached Noah's soccer team, attended every school event, and made sure to tell his son he loved him every single day. And Noah grew. He carried me with him, not as a burden but as a companion. He'd talk to me sometimes, telling me about his day, asking me for advice on problems both big and small. I don't know if he truly heard my responses or if he was just listening to his own inner wisdom, but either way, it helped him navigate the world with unusual empathy and grace. He made friends easily and was known at school as the kid who was kind to everyone, especially those who were sick or struggling. When anyone asked why, he'd say simply, "My brother taught me that everyone is fighting a battle you can't see. You should always be gentle." The house gradually transformed from a mausoleum of grief into a home again. There was laughter. There were arguments, normal family arguments about homework and bedtime, not the desperate conflicts of a family in crisis. There were game nights and movie nights and lazy Sunday mornings. My bedroom remained mostly unchanged, but it was no longer a shrine. Mom would go in there occasionally, usually to sit in the reading chair and think, but she didn't spend hours crying anymore. Sometimes Noah would play in there, building Lego spaceships and telling me about his latest adventures. On the first anniversary of my death, they visited my grave together. Mom brought flowers, night-blooming jasmine from the garden. Dad brought a small toy spaceship to place on the headstone. And Noah brought a letter he'd written in his careful 6-year-old handwriting. "Dear Liam," he read aloud, "I miss you every day, but I'm not sad all the time anymore. Mom says that's okay, that you wouldn't want us to be sad forever. I'm in 1st grade now, and I'm learning to read chapter books. I wish you were here to help me with the hard words. Mom and Dad are doing better. Mom smiles a lot now, and Dad tells jokes at dinner. I think we're going to be okay. I hope you're happy wherever you are. I hope you're not sick anymore. I hope you're flying among the stars like you always wanted. I love you. Your brother, Noah." He folded the letter carefully and tucked it under the spaceship. Mom and Dad each placed a hand on his shoulders, and they stood there together, a family of 3 who carried the memory of a 4th member with love instead of anguish. I stood beside them, my form more translucent than ever, the thread in my chest now barely visible. It was almost time. That night, I appeared in Noah's room one final time. He was 8 now, 3 years older than when I'd died, and he'd grown so much. He was reading in bed, a chapter book about space explorers, when he suddenly looked up. "Liam," he whispered, setting the book aside. "I can feel you. You're here, aren't you?" I moved closer, and this time, I could almost make myself visible, a faint shimmer in the air, like heat rising from summer pavement. Noah's eyes widened as he perceived the distortion. "You're leaving, aren't you?" he said, and there was no question in his voice. Somehow, he knew. "You're ready to go." I nodded, the motion causing the shimmer to ripple. Noah's eyes filled with tears, but he smiled through them. "It's okay," he said. "I understand. You stayed to make sure we'd be all right, didn't you? To help us heal." Another nod. "We are all right," Noah continued, his voice strong despite the tears. "We miss you, and we'll always miss you, but we're happy again. Mom and Dad are happy. I'm happy. You don't have to worry about us anymore. I moved closer still, and through some final gift of grace, I was able to rest my hand on his shoulder. He couldn't see it clearly, but he could feel the weight, the pressure, the love. Thank you for being the best little brother, I tried to say, and somehow, miraculously, he heard me. Not with his ears, but with his heart. His face crumpled, and he reached up to where my hand rested. Thank you for being my big brother. Thank you for watching over us. Thank you for everything. We stayed like that for a long moment, connected across the veil between life and death, between past and future. Then I felt the thread give one final gentle tug. I have to go now, I whispered. I know, Noah said. Will I ever see you again? Someday, I promised. But not for a very long time. You have so much life to live, Noah. So many adventures ahead. Live them for both of us, okay? He nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks. I will. I promise. And Noah? Tell Mom and Dad that I forgive them. Tell them I understand. Tell them I love them, and I always did, even in my worst moments. Tell them to forgive themselves. I will, he whispered. I'll tell them tomorrow. Goodbye, little brother. Goodbye, Liam. I love you. I love you too. The thread finally released, and I felt myself beginning to rise, to drift upward and outward, away from the house, away from the family I'd left behind. As I ascended, I looked down one last time at Noah, at the home we'd shared, at the life that continued without me. It was beautiful. Broken and mended, scarred but healing, imperfect but full of love. The last thing I saw before the light took me was Noah at his window, looking up at the stars, his hand raised in a small wave. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that they would be okay. They would more than okay. They would be happy. 15 years later. Noah stood in the backyard of his childhood home, now 23 years old, home from medical school for the holidays. The garden his mother had planted in my memory had matured into something spectacular, night-blooming jasmine, moonflowers, and evening primrose creating a fragrant sanctuary that came alive after dark. He'd brought his fiancée, Sarah, home to meet his parents. She stood beside him now, her hand in his, looking up at the December sky. Your mom told me about your brother, Sarah said softly. About Liam. I'm so sorry you lost him. Noah smiled, and there was no pain in the expression, only gentle remembrance. I didn't lose him, he said. He's still with me, in a way. Everything good I do, every patient I help, every kindness I show, that's him living through me. Is that why you became a pediatric cardiologist? She asked. Because of his heart condition? Partly, Noah admitted. But also because he taught me that every day matters, that every moment of life is precious, even the painful ones. Especially the painful ones. They teach us to appreciate what we have. Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder. He would be proud of you. I hope so, Noah said. Then he looked up at the stars, the same stars he and I had gazed at together on that last birthday celebration. I think so. Inside the house, Mom was setting the table for dinner. Her hair had more gray now, and lines creased the corners of her eyes, but she moved with lightness, with purpose. Dad sat in his favorite chair, reading glasses perched on his nose, looking at old photo albums with a smile instead of tears. The photos showed a skinny boy with a too big smile and eyes that knew more about pain than any child should. But they also showed love, Mom's hand on my shoulder, Dad's arm around me, Noah and I building blocks on the living room floor. He was beautiful, Sarah said when Mom showed her the albums. You can see how much you all loved each other. We did, Mom said, and her voice was steady. We weren't perfect. We made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But we loved each other fiercely, and in the end, that's what mattered. That night, as had become tradition, they went outside after dinner to look at the stars. Dad brought out his telescope, now upgraded several times but still the same one he'd used to teach both his sons about the universe. Noah looked through the eyepiece, finding constellations with practiced ease. There's Orion, he said, adjusting the focus. Liam's favorite. Did I ever tell you what he said the first time he saw it clearly? Dad asked. He was maybe 6 years old. He looked through the telescope, saw those 3 bright stars in the belt, and said, Dad, that's where I want to go when I grow up. A peaceful silence settled over them. Maybe that's where he is now, Noah said quietly. Flying among the stars, finally free from pain, finally able to go everywhere he dreamed of going. Mom wiped her eyes, but she was smiling. I like to think so. I like to think he's happy, wherever he is. I know he is, Noah said with certainty. And I know he's still watching over us, making sure we're okay. Some nights, when I'm studying late at the hospital, trying to save a kid with a heart condition, I swear I can feel him there with me, guiding my hands, helping me see what I need to see. Dad wrapped his arm around Noah's shoulders. He'd be so proud of the man you've become. We're so proud of you. You raised me, Noah said simply. You and Mom and Liam. All of you together. You taught me about love and sacrifice and forgiveness. You taught me that families aren't perfect, but they're still worth fighting for. Sarah watched this exchange with tears in her eyes, understanding now the depth of love in this family, the way they'd taken tragedy and transformed it into purpose. As midnight approached, Mom lit 9 candles on a small cake, the age I'd been when I died, forever frozen in time while they continued to grow and change. Happy birthday, Liam, they said together, a chorus of voices spanning generations and loss and love. And somewhere in the starlight, somewhere in the spaces between moments, I heard them. I couldn't respond anymore, I'd moved on long ago to whatever comes after, but their love reached me nonetheless, a warmth that transcended death and distance. They were happy. They were healing. They were whole. And in the end, that was all I'd ever wanted. The candles flickered in the gentle night breeze, and one by one, they went out, not from wind, but as if someone, somewhere, was blowing them out with a breath of gratitude and peace. Noah smiled up at the stars. I love you too, big brother, he whispered. Rest well. And I did. In memory of all the children whose lives were too brief but whose love left permanent marks on the world. You are not forgotten. You are not lost. You live on in every kindness, every moment of grace, every act of love performed in your name. May you rest in the stars you always dreamed of touching,